Episode 24, This Side of Paradise.
Compliance, the final frontier. Tom Fox is the voyager of trekking through compliance. His mission? To explore the original series and seek out and share what it can teach you about compliance. Here's your host, Tom Fox.
Episode 23, This Side of Paradise. In this episode of Trekking Through Compliance, we consider the compliance lessons learned from This Side of Paradise, which aired on March 2, 1967, and occurred on stardate 3417.3. When the Enterprise speeds to the agricultural colony on Omicron Ceti III, they expect to find none of the 150 colonists still alive, as the planet is being bombarded with deadly and newly discovered Berthold rays. Kirk, McCoy, Spock, and Sulu and others all beam down to the surface to speak with the colonists and their leader, Elias Sandoval. However, they find them alive and in perfect health. Too perfect to health, as Bones discovers when he finds that Sandoval now has a healthy appendix, despite the fact that records show it to have been previously removed. Meanwhile, the colonist Layla Kalomi shows Spock the colonist's secret: plants which spray spores that take up residence in the brain and in return provide perfect health and complete well-being. In addition, the plants thrive on Berthold rays. Sulu is soon given a similar treatment and remarks to Kirk, "Of course we can't remove the colony, it would be wrong." Alarmed with what he sees, Kirk tries to get in touch with Spock. However, it's too late, as Spock is then frolicking with Layla. In the meantime, McCoy is also infected. Not only does he make himself a mint julep, but he also sends up hundreds of plants to the Enterprise. Kirk is beamed up with an infected transporter operator who is systematically beaming down the crew of the Enterprise. Uhura has short-circuited all communications except to the surface. Kirk is soon the only one left aboard, and he too is infected by a stray plant left on the bridge. After opening his safe and looking through its content, Kirk becomes upset, as one side of him wants to beam down and the other side is devoted to the ship. These violent emotions, Kirk soon discovers, drive out the spores. Subsequently, he has Spock beam up and proceeds to get him angry by calling him a mutinous, disloyal, computerized half-breed. Spock beams up Layla to explain to her what has happened, but the pain of finding out she has lost Spock causes the spores to be driven from her as well. Layla asks Spock if he has another name, and he only replies, "You could not pronounce it." Spock prepares a subsonic transmitter which will broadcast over the communications channel and provide those on the planet signals to become irritable and angry. Fights begin to break out, including between Sulu and Dassault, then McCoy and Sandoval, and soon the spores are driven out of everyone on the planet. The crew beams back up, and the Enterprise is free to continue on its way. Spock is back to his old self, but we find out on the planet he was happy for the first time in his life. Fun fact, the script was written, or rather rewritten, by Dorothy Fontana. She was Gene Roddenberry's administrative assistant, and he told her, "If you can rewrite this script, you will be my story editor." She became a story editor for the original series under the name D.C. Fontana.
This is a very interesting episode. Obviously, Spock in Love is always going to be interesting in Star Trek, the original series, and we have that here. Also is Jill Ireland, her only appearance in Star Trek ever, but she was a great actress. She was a gorgeous woman. She plays the role of Layla really as well as I think anyone could. She understands the role she has and the character she plays, loving a Vulcan, and that certainly presages many of the things that we see Nurse Chapel experience. This episode also has some very disturbing and overt racism when Kirk calls Spock a half-breed to try to get him out from under the influence of the spores. It is difficult to watch now to see such language used on a television show, even for the stated reasons that Kirk did it. And the fight between Kirk and Spock is certainly one that we do not see literally, maybe one or two other times, but not very often. But the overt racism that Kirk uses is very troubling.
So what are the compliance takeaways from this episode? Well, first of all, let's start with a fun fact in D.C. Fontana. She became one of the most beloved writers on Star Trek, yet she was stuck in the 60s working as Gene Roddenberry's secretary. So it clearly presages the question, do you know the talents of your staff? Do you know what they can do? Do you know if they have other talents? And D.C. Fontana certainly was able to utilize her skills to become a story editor for Star Trek, the original series, Star Trek, the animated series, and the first two seasons of Star Trek TNG. Quite a step up, but really it was the use of talents that she already had. So do you know the talents of your staff and what they may be able to bring to your compliance program? Second, do you continuously monitor? The spores, in this case, stopped the colonists from actually achieving anything. They lived in a perfect world, but they actually did nothing. So, do you continuously monitor? Because if you don't continuously monitor, your compliance program may well suffer, and the business risks may increase without your recognizing it. If you don't continuously monitor, are you going into new markets? Do you have a new product? Do you have a new service? Do you have a new something? Do you have a new anything? All of these can provide additional risks. And even if you don't go into a new market, new product, or new service, the current products or services you had, certainly if we take this administration's OFAC and trade sanctions war against literally the rest of the world as a symbol, your risk can change almost on a daily basis. Risk can be threatened, or trade sanctions rather can be threatened, and then they can be pulled back. So what are your risks, and how are you going to manage those risks if you don't monitor those risks going forward? And finally, near the end of the episode, McCoy gets in a fight with the colony leader, Elias Sandoval. And the fight is around what will be McCoy's role going forward. McCoy says he's a doctor and he doesn't do work. Sandoval says there's no ill health effects, so they don't need a doctor. So what's the role of each one of your team members, and can your team members take on multiple roles going forward? Certainly McCoy did not believe that he could or should take over any additional roles, and that sort of specialization can certainly be very helpful, but you may need multiple players to take over multiple roles. Some compliance functions of large organizations are able to specialize, but within that context, how much specialization do you allow, and how much specialization silos these people from being able to learn about other compliance areas going forward? So do you rotate your compliance personnel through the various aspects of your compliance program? If you're a solo CCO, I recognize it may be a one-man or one-woman shop that's doing everything, but what happens if you have more than one people, and do you rotate so that you have a good base or bench if somebody drops out, someone gets sick, someone leaves the organization, and you can fill that gap on a not an expedited basis, but you can fill it on a temporary basis in case or before you can hire to fill that. So what is the roles of your team members, and how do they train for other roles? I hope you'll join us tomorrow where we take up Devil in the Dark.
If you enjoyed this episode of Trekking Through Compliance, you can help it grow by sharing it with the biggest Trek fan you know.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.